I started reading Laura Ingalls Wilder books over and over and over. And when I was about 12, I think, I was so hooked that my mother had listened to this program called Kitchen Clatter on the radio, which I think everybody's mother who ever grew up in the Midwest listened to. But they at one point said, this is Laura Ingalls Wilder's address, and she would be happy if you would write to her. So I did. And she actually wrote me a letter back. So that I was hooked after that. I could never have not written something. And I think I probably started something I referred to as a book when I was about 12 or 13. It was terrible, of course. And then I kind of graduated into poetry as an adolescent, as most adolescents do. I've written songs. I got hooked on the theater and started writing plays. I started writing mysteries about, 7 years ago, I think. The Equalizer experience was very strange because I had wanted to learn to write film. And I thought, all right, start with television. I liked Edward Woodward as an actor very much. I had seen Breaker Morant. I had seen any number of his other films. And I found the series the most palatable thing I could find on television because I enjoyed watching him, basically, and what he did with characterization. Well, what was happening was I did 2 scripts on speculation. They sat in the writing office for a year and a half. The staff writers burned out. Edward Woodward was yowling for better scripts because he was bored to death. They finally went through the pile of scripts in the corner and they said, oh, look here. And so they showed them to Woodward. Woodward said, call her. They called me. They said, be in California the day after tomorrow. We'll pay the airfare. They paid for first-class airfare, hotel, studio limo, the whole thing. But it was luck and situation, and I think a fairly good script. So I'm still writing for film, and the name of the episode was, what was the name of the episode? Oh dear, Riding the Elephant it was called. It was about the Thai community in New York and in Chinatown. Of course, the writing staff decided that it was too difficult to write about the Thai community, so they changed all the Thai into Chinese. They do things like that. They were actually bought, the first 3 of them were bought on the strength of the first one. I got a 3-book contract on the strength of the first book that I wrote, and the series, which features an older man who is a professor of Shakespeare at a small college in upstate New York. His name is Winston Marlowe Sherman. And he is, when that book begins, 68 years old. Now, 6 books later, he's only 70. But one does have to fudge these things from time to time if you want to keep going. Sweet Narcissus, of which I am currently trying to write a movie script. The second book is called Rope Dancer's Fall, and the third was called Deception Island. And those 3 came out from Bantam as paperbacks and are gradually being put out as hardcover books. After that, we moved into Doubleday, Perfect Crime books, and now they're coming out as hardcover. And the first of those was Dreamland and Sorrow Heart. And the one that will be out is called The Very Dead of Winter, which is about Winston's confrontation of the fact of his own death. It's about an old man who feels death putting its finger on him and knows that he can't run from it and he can't change it. He can only face it and learn to live with it or die with it. And he goes to do this, he goes to Canada, to Toronto, for several reasons. that I will leave to the book to explain, but part of them is he's led there by a man that he confronted in the very first book, Sweet Narcissus, a man named Anthony Devlin, who is an actor, who has a wife who has gone mad, and their story is so tangled with his own and has led him into this confrontation of his own limitations, that he cannot face the facts of his own life unless he confronts them. There are no longer any guards, and the locks have no keys. Doors cannot be closed without risk of confusion, and most of them have been removed. The half-burnt house is a skull, polished clean, all its secret chambers open, filled with the whine of northeast wind and the knifing cry of gulls. Those who are mad are no longer compelled to stay here, but the weight of volition burdens them like gratitude, and they do not go. They defy the official condemnation in hope of some tenuous redemption to be found nowhere but here, like sailors going down with their prison ship. In time, their madness will cease to be noticed, and they will become the caretakers of the sane. The two elderly nuns, Dorcas and Justitia, already submit often to their greater wisdom, smiling. But now, as cold clenches and gathers in the northern autumn, all here have become equals, displaced persons defying the comfortable and the bitterly sane. They have been ordered to leave, but there is nowhere else. The old mansion turned madhouse on its high bluff looks out on water, seems to hover in midair above the broken rind of the earth, the exposed marrow of prehistory, where the cliff shears away into the ancient lake, and in this unlikely union of elements, of air, water, fire, and the wheel of time, the tenants of the house perceive in this dry season the faint hope of final possibility. They drift together like sweet dead leaves in the nameless currents of ruin, nuns and madmen distinguished only by the rhythms of their prayers. Vandals set the fire on a night of muggy heat at the end of the short Canadian summer. Pictures were taken of them by security cameras and broadcast on Toronto television, a reward offered. One is only a crouching shadow on the grainy film. It might be any sex, any race, any age. The other is plainly a boy, perhaps 14, 15. The pale, sullen ellipse of face, the eyes dark screws driven deep into the skull to keep out light, to keep out hope. From that flicker of light, thinks the woman called Lena, from the strike of his match against the stone steps of St. Saviour's, he will date his own madness, count it in days and years. Who says the mad have no calendars? Lena herself can date precisely the winter afternoon, describe the peculiar bruised red of a pot of spent cyclamen on her aunt's London tea table, hear the wet sizzle of the gas fire. She can date also the moment she has ceased to be altogether mad. On the hot night, her husband stayed late with her after Vespers in the nuns' chapel, sat hunched on the altar steps, the rich darkness of his voice as he spoke. The voice that has followed her in and out of her lost country, that reaches her like a line flung across water which she grasps against her will. A bright mist of magic fell on the morning, and honey on the stone. His voice is delicately shaded as a Michelangelo drawing. It owns her memory. The mind's ear vibrates with the echo of him, battered by lines from old plays, words said to one another on the stage or only imagined, bits of old poems, fairy tales, the beginnings of novels never finished. Laid down on the seat of an airplane, a cafe table, a dressing room couch, and all in the voice of this man whose shape she wears in her bones. In sleep, his pale eyes live under her eyelids, his pulse throbs in her fingertips, and when she wakes, she is as full of him as if she has conceived the child his seedless sperm does not contain. Once upon a time, There lived a queen made of ice. Her coach was drawn by 4 black horses, and their hooves were blood. Over the years, Lena has inflicted scars on her husband's body. Once at their cottage in Devon, she drove a hay fork into his shoulder, once burned his arm with lye. Having plunged him into ruin, taken his occupation, friends, position, self-esteem, she has hoped he would leave her, but he cannot. He is still here, still the same, soft-voiced, faithful, meticulous, a little shy. He loves her. Even now. The insult of this hopeless loving robs her of free will, and it is more than her pride can bear. I went out at the eastern gate. I never thought to return, but I came back to the gate with my heart full of sorrow. His voice fills her with hate. It is her only way of loving. And it has brought her out of madness 1 inch at a time, as he has always known it would. He loves her enough to be hated for her sake. On that hot night, as he sat speaking random lines to her from Shakespeare, Webster, Marlowe, Ben Jonson, the Vandal's fire was set, and some shred of her old self began to take command of her. So far, Lena has told no one of this sea change. She is safe between countries here, no longer mad, and not yet sane, and she needs time. During the day, she sits as always, straight and silent, the military discipline of despair that renounces speech and motion. During the day, she is catatonic, closed in a circle of glass so brittle it will shatter if she moans or whispers, a spun cage of purifying loneliness. They say she has killed a man, perhaps more than one, and though she has no memory of these crimes, this is Lena's last absolution, this final time of exile from her waking self. It is only during the night that she no longer obliges herself to be mad. Soon she will leave here, but now, in the dark, she drifts from room to room, facing the last of her ghosts. In the lengthening Canadian nights, she wanders unnoticed among the half-dozen private rooms and the great empty wards, once ballrooms, billiard rooms, salons of the timber king who built the place. Lena drinks in the urine smell of sunken mattresses, the stink of excrement which alone confirms the humanity of madmen, counting the ones who have already gone, as a newspaper names the casualties of war. There are only 2 other patients left at St. Saviour's now, the man called Simon, who has no ends to his fingers, and the old Chinese the nuns call Father. And Lena stands above their sleeping bodies, in her hand a bottle of red wine she has stolen from the nuns' despoiled chapel. She lifts the bottle to her lips and takes a sip of the wine, and holds its warm, sharp sweetness in her mouth, then bends to kiss the stumps of Simon's unformed fingers, the parchment skin of the old man's throat, leaving the print of the wine on them like birthmarks, then padding silently out on cold, bare feet. The house is partly open to the night. The fire has eaten away 2 of the downstairs rooms, and 1 wall of the library is gone, the books with it. In the chapel, a burnt Christ watches planets fall into the lake from where he hangs, a patient black brother. The 4 bottom steps of the stair are missing, and someone has made a bridge with piles of bricks from one of the toppled chimneys. A narrow plank slants sharply into the frail blackened ruin, like the steep road that plunges down to Lake Ontario from the Scarborough Bluffs on which the old house, the madhouse called St. Saviour's, balances. The woman, Lena, it is a name of childhood which her madness has reclaimed, moves carefully down the incline, 1 bare foot after the other, feeling with her toes for splinters until she stands in the downstairs hall. Though her breath hangs like smoke in the November air, she does not notice the cold. The front door has been burned away, and there are small sounds in the darkness, night sounds of animals who come and go. Cats roam in and out. Chipmunks scuttle, gleaning the ruinous kitchen, and gulls perch on the black beams of the library, open to the sky. Like lone holy women in the ancient forests, she makes friends of them, speaking their wordless language, and the cats with ears torn in battle seek her out, waiting silently for her nightly passage through the dark house, waiting for her hands to stroke damage from them. Tonight there is no time for cats. Lena goes cautiously into the kitchen, a big striped tomcat guarding her. She is a few years short of 60, but she has the shape of a child, and a child's wide, weary eyes, and she is arrogant, dauntless as a child, even in this darkness. Upstairs, where the remaining patients, the 2 old nuns and Lena's solitary visitor, are sleeping, there is uncertain light from a portable generator, and sometimes there are candles from the storage cupboard, large white altar candles meant for the chapel. Lena steals them with the wine and stations them like sentinels along the hallways, lighting them with hoarded matches when the others have gone to sleep, walking invisible map lines between the flames down the long, narrow corridors. But downstairs, the darkness is total, except for the flat gleam of the lake below, its dull circle widening into the distance like black glass beyond the hole where the wall is burnt away. On its surface, tiny seeds of light appear and disappear, the running lights of grain ships, ore boats, yachts under uneasy sail. The floors of the Great Lakes, they say, are paved with drowned sailors' bones. The woman whose mad self is Lena is looking for something in particular. Most of the kitchen is gone, and what is left is jumbled together among fallen beams, pantry doors hacked through by firemen's axes, drawers dangling crazily from the black skeletons of cupboards. Mice who can find food anywhere scurry away as she enters, and the tomcat lets them go, his eyes gold in the darkness. Lena, hearing their sound, freezes, startled, a slender pillar of brightness in the liquid womb of the place, and she spins round as if she has been struck by a blow from behind. But only the cat is there, watching. Her visitor, who is her husband, is still upstairs, still sleeping as he always does on the sagging daybed in what is called the sunroom, his long body dormant, his breath diving bitterly deeper and deeper into the cavern of himself. No, he is not here. She is clean and alone, her will perfect. She feels her way to one of the drawers, rummages with her small fingers until she finds what she needs, then gropes among the rubble for the door again and the bridge back to the others. The cat, observing mortal boundaries, watches from his darkness as she goes. When she enters the sunroom, the man is still asleep. He is tall and thin, as an old rope stretched too long in bad weather. And though in their youth he possessed a frangible, sexless beauty common to the displaced, his beauty now in his 60s is that of a fine, steady-handed carving in old, bleached wood. His cheekbones stand out like the rising wings of a small bird above the shadowed hollows of his cheeks, and his eyes, when open, are a blue so pale and clear that in some lights they look white, like the eyes of wolves. The line of his brows is a perfect curve, but like his fair hair, they have darkened to grayish-brown, and since he first brought her here, he has grown a beard, untrimmed and scruffy as fur along his jaw. His left ear is pierced, and he wears a small gold hoop in it, the circle of gold that is said to keep sailors from drowning. He breathes heavily, as though he is drowning now, his tongue just visible between parted lips that show blood where he bites at them in sleep. Lena brushes her fingertips along his temple, watching him. These lost ones with their dead eyes are irresistible to her, have been since childhood. They are her mother's eyes, and her lost father's, and her dead brothers, whom she despised except in memory. They enter her like surgeons and drag love out of her. As she looks down at him, love for her husband empties her, pulling breath from her chest, an iron collar tight around her throat. She has brought a candle from the hallway, but the light does not wake him. She puts it down on the floor, under the high bow windows overlooking the lake. Beside it, the knife she has found in the kitchen. It is a boning knife, scalpel thin, precise and ceremonious, the steel blade still gleaming, though the wooden handle is only a charred stump. She takes off the worn calico wrapper in which the nuns dress her, the clumsy cotton stockings and the thick underwear, until she stands naked in the warm dance of candlelight, her image immense, deformed by the curve of the window. When the man with wolf's eyes, who is her husband, wakes, she is standing beside his bed, the knife in her right hand, the flickering candle in her left. It is a ritual they have performed between them for the past 6 nights, the light, the darkness, the bright knife. Anthony Devlin, once Sir Anthony, but now no more, comes here to sleep because, like the rest, like Simon and Father and the 2 used-up nuns, ruin suits him best, and because she controls him, his wife, Claire Warne, as she has always done. He cannot leave her. With or without speech, he knows what she wants, and in time he will do it. He reads the silent message of her knife and knows to whom it is addressed. Tony Devlin does not speak, merely lies open-eyed, his breathing still the deep, measured battering of his sleep. Claire bends to him, breast swaying, the candle dripping wax on his chest where his shirt is open. She dips suddenly, and he feels her breath on his throat, the faint rasp of her tongue, and there is an ache in him for her long, dark hair, which is gone. The nuns have shaved it off to stop her knotting it around her neck, and it has grown out pewter grey, the cold grey of the Toronto rain that spats the windows nearly every night. Through the frost of this newborn hair, the delicate shape of her skull glistens, heartbreaking as an abandoned shell. Woman with the veil of hair, I see morning through you, as God through falling snow. Let me kill you, he whispers as she trails the blade across his wrist, and a bright thread of blood veins his skin. He knows it is neither her own death nor his that Claire most desires. It is the death of a meddling old man called Winston Sherman, whose memory is a taste of brine in Anthony Devlin's mouth. His hate is cold and heavy, and in time it will smash him as it keeps his wife a prisoner of her mind. The thin knife drawn tenderly along her wrists and throat, and then along his own. His arms around her in the bed warmth of blood, in the safe dark. Unless, thinks Devlin, unless he is dead. Unless I build death around him like a house that has no doors. The idea frightens him. Dev is no murderer and no madman. Claire's death and his own, they would be a single suicide, and he does not mind dying. It is killing, and then living forever with the dead. He is an actor, and superstitious as Macbeth. Already, old Sherman's dead eyes peer at him from the darkness, lidless and desolate. Claire loves his voice, and perhaps he can seduce her as he has done before. Perhaps he can make her want the knife at her throat as much as he wants it for himself. He is Irish, and death is a music in him. I am stretched out upon your grave, and the smell of your clay is on me. Give me the knife, and let me kill you now, and then myself, he says again. Sweet Christ, my love, let's have it over with. The fine blade is against his open chest, cold, prickling the grey-brown hairs, and there is sweat on his upper lip. Whatever has been taken from him by Winston Sherman, who has brought them both here, whatever his brain may urge or his despair demand, Devlin's body is strong, and it does not mean to die. He is like a violated woman who must perfect her hate in order to be clean. Anoint me with sweet grass and young nettles, for I am stretched out upon your grave. He knows what he must do. Tomorrow he will set death in motion. Claire, he groans. Claire. It is the strange name her father made up to suit his dream of her. Jewel, it means in Polish, the shapeless matter from which jewels give birth to themselves. Claire. She sets the candle on the floor beside him and slips her free hand down his body to where his sex waits, passive, wintry. He grabs at her, smashes her to him, imagines he hears her sweet bones crack, tastes her blood on his tongue. He has no desire left, but he is cold and needs the warmth of her. His long, thin fingers search her, and he pulls her hard onto him, remembering the stories of fishermen, how they take seals for their wives and lie warm with them through storms, ice their beds and snow their pillows. God, my love, he breathes as he enters her, and the burnt handle of the knife slips from her fingers into his own. In the high room, where Lena's ghosts come and go, a woman is dancing. Though she is old, her naked body is lithe and bright in the shingled darkness, and her bare arms shine like jagged moon-drunk branches as she spins, climbing the dark like a rising lover. Her face is Lena's face, and yet is not. Thick spines of frost grow along her cheekbones. Snow breathes in the cleft of her small chin. Ice bandages the caves of her wide grey eyes with glass. Frost glitters between her boyish breasts and laces the soft curve of her belly, and icicles dazzle her drowning hair. She is spirit and archangel, keeper of the few and fragile threads that stitch together what remains of Lena's memory, and she comes only in dreams. As the woman whose face is Lena's mother's face, and yet is not, whirls and dances, music comes from her. It might be Bach or Mozart. It begins as the human sob of a violin, then becomes a piano, then a cello, and last, always last, it is the thin, defiant piping of a penny whistle. With its tinny tune comes Jakub, her father's groom, her mother's lover, and Lena's second most elusive ghost. Lena is barely 4, and she envies Jakub. He is 19, and he owns the penny whistle. He is playing in the stable yard at Sosna. The word means pine tree, the name of her father's estate near Lodz, not far from the Czech border. In another month, Hitler's 10th Army will march over Lodz and over Sosna. By the middle of September, Krzysztof Turbasz, Lena's father, and a dozen of his fellow officers will have tried to defend Warsaw by charging their cavalry horses at a battalion of German tanks. When Krzysztof is dead, it will be impossible to tell his blood and brains from those of his horse, whose lineage was almost as old and probably nobler, though less inclined to hopeless chivalry. The horse, it will be reported, was less than enthusiastic when the charge was ordered, while Krzysztof rode singing into the mouths of the tanks. What he sang will not be reported. Perhaps it is the tune of the penny whistle. When slack-jawed, vegetable death visits Lena, sleepless with dreams in the empty ruins of St. Saviour's, it is always Jakub's face he wears. For like death, Jakub is no chivalric fool, and like death also, he has time on his side. His brain is dull, but his body is wise, and he sits cross-legged by the cistern where the horses, Black Sharni, her brother Stefan's gelding, Labech, the white swan with his lovely neck, and Spotted Kundel, called Mongrel for his coat, who gallops like a mad east wind between her mother's thighs, come to drink at night and morning. Sharni, Labech, Kundel, Sosna, Jakub. These names and her own are the only words of Polish Lena remembers. Even the song of Jakub's penny whistle, when it has words at all, comes back to her in English or muddled with bits of French. Piper, oh piper, come play us a tune, for summer is come and the earth is in bloom. Dancer, sweet dancer, the winter comes soon, and you shall kiss death by the light of the moon. Jakub's thick, insolent lips suck the mouthpiece of the tin flute as his sullen eyes stroke the woman in the open window, assess the breadth of her hips, travel down her slender throat to the bit of shadow at the open neck of her silk blouse, the fine golden down that glistens with her sweat. Lena's mother slams the window shut, but all day she hums the tune under her breath, and at night, When the windows are open and the pines around the duck pond moan to each other, and the white lace curtains drift like snow in and out with the wind, the penny whistle plays its song again, and her mother's laugh runs soft-footed through the carpeted halls and out the gates and is lost like Lena's father in the great plain where the world ends. Dancer, sweet dancer, the winter comes soon, and you shall kiss death by the light of the moon. It is because of stupid Jakob that her mother begins to hate Lena and sends her away to England to live out the war with her Aunt Maria. It is because of the penny whistle that Lena will go mad. She half wakens now and creeps closer to the bone and muscle of Anthony Devlin, squeezing her eyes shut so as to see clearly, to will back her dream. The room of her mind is very bright and absolutely silent, and it contains the universe. Above her hangs a cascade of fine, clear, hand-blown glass. The small globes, of which there are 8, are shaped like pears and apples, hung by chains of crystal from a single great bowl of light in the center. Electricity has come late to rural Poland, even to the estates of petty princes like Turbash. To Lena, it seems the light has come on the same day her father rides away with his regiment, the last day of July, 1939. She lies on her back on the Shirazi carpet in the drawing room and stares into the center of the sour light till she is half blind, begging it to give back her father. It does not. It spills down instead over the apples and the pears, and over Lena's mother, and over Jakob, who hides a Nazi banner he will hang out his window when the tanks roll in. Who knows where all the German armies are along the border, and how they will march to Warsaw. The light swallows Jakob. It sets fire to the damask walls, licks out through the lace curtains, burns up the lake and gobbles the flat plain where the armies wait for the world to end. Qu'est-ce que c'est, maman? Cries the child Lena into the dark. She speaks French in case her governess, who has forbidden Polish, is listening at the door. There is no electric light in the nursery yet. There will never be. J'ai peur, maman, j'ai peur. Afraid. I am afraid. There is a rustle of loose silk against her mother's body, and a scent of crushed grass and sweat bursts through the door. The woman is shivering, turning to ice where she stands, bending over her daughter's cot. The war has not yet begun, but already Sofia Turbash is dying of it. Why do you speak French to me, she screams. You are a stranger. You are no child of mine. Who are you, then? Tell me your name. She can still feel the little girl's heartbeat inside her own belly, and she must tear it out of her now, before it is too late for both of them. Love batters her like owl's wings against a window pane, and she is full of fear. Together, neither of them will last the war out. Only the isolate survive. Sofia snatches the small, limp body out of the cot, smashes it against her, and begins to run outside into the darkness and the ripe grass. The child is sobbing, the woman dead-eyed, implacable, already lost. They run, stumbling over hummocks and scratched by branches, to the gate that opens onto the plain, and there the woman sinks down, breathless, crouched over the child's body. Kochanie, she says, staring out at the plain beyond, where Hitler's monkeys strut in shiny boots, where her husband, whose weight she still feels upon her each night before she sleeps, has turned to smoke, where Jakob, whom she has sought out for the peculiar gift he has of killing souls, stands twirling his tin flute. Kochanie, she whispers, her lips still sticky with love, brushing her daughter's silken forehead. My darling. Lena, whose whole name is the Princess Claire Maria Magdalena Warinska Turbash, who will in time become the famous English actress Claire Warren, tears the pearl brooch from her mother's gown and drives the small, sharp pin as deep as she can into the flesh of the woman's arm. Sofia does not wince. She is silent, feeling only the stamp of jackboots on her eyes. Her maid will find her in her bed on the morning Lena leaves for England, a kitchen knife buried to its hilt below her left breast. The dream ends. Lena, careworn, is thrown from it violently, her whole body jerking with the shock. She rises from her sleeping husband, who still holds the bright knife. Why she has brought it, what it has to do with the past and with the future, with her mother and brother, with the man she killed in New York, and with the old man, Winston Sherman, whom she hates, Claire does not know. She knows only that the blade is slender and beautiful, and it suits Tony Devlin, whom she loves more than memory. It is the sword of Laertes, with poison at its tip. You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audience to this act, had I but time, as this fell sergeant Death is strict in his arrest, oh, I could tell you. Love, says Lena softly and kisses Dev's forehead. Cochanie, my dear love. They are the first words in any known language she has spoken aloud in more than 4 years. She will never speak again. By tomorrow night, Lena will be dead. Mors et vita duello conflixere mirando, dux vitae mortibus regnat vivas. In the blackened chapel, the two old nuns, Sister Dorcas and Sister Mary Justitia, destitute of priests, make bold to call forth God in their own right. They say, as they have done every morning since the fire, the solemn mass of Easter. Death and life contended in awesome battle. The Prince of Life is dead, and living reigneth. Dorcas is a shorebird born on the Cornish coast some 80 years ago, and she knows how to nest in cliffs and crannies. Like Justitia's, her order has gone bankrupt, and there is no corner of the government pension plan in which an elderly religious seems to fit. She had a sister once, but that was long ago, some other planet. She vaguely remembers a laughing face a little rounder than her own, with the same bright hazel eyes, the same cleft chin, as though they were two fresh loaves with the same baker's mark and a cherry each for mouths. But memory is not refuge, and Dorcas is practical. Until the constables and the provincial welfare workers and the bishop's busybodies come to haul her out, she will stay here, in St. Saviour's with Justitia, and the ones upstairs with Father, Simon, the woman Lena, and the tall, sad Irishman who comes and goes as he pleases among them, often bringing tinned salmon, treats of cakes and jam, bags of fresh ground coffee, and phonograph records, to whose music on one soft April evening he danced a waltz with each of them in turn, the old Chinese bowing and laughing in his arms, the stumps of Simon's fingers laid delicately on his shoulder as they glided through the ward to a Strauss melody, Justitia at arm's length from him, but graceful, precise, secretly delighted with his courtly manners, his simple elegance of soul, and Lena, lifted in his arms and carried when she would not dance, turned to the music in spite of herself. They were that night like children at a dancing school, he their graying, soft-footed master. If she had met this Irishman, this Mr. Cornelius, when she was a girl, thinks Dorcas, she would have loved him far more than she's ever managed to love God. Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi miserere nobis. Sister Justitia lifts the chalice, then bends to kiss the altar. She is a year or two younger than Dorcas, a thin, dry woman like a sand dune blown hard by weathers, born in the American Southwest and carrying some of its hard brightness in her small, glittering eyes. She has no memories of sisters, mothers, aunts. Alone since birth, she has depended only upon God and herself. Now, confronted with the growing frailties of an aging body, she dare not bring God to book. She despises only herself for the unpredictable kidneys, the worsening cataract in her right eye, the arthritis that makes her use a cane to walk. Every ache and pain is a sin she has committed against herself on purpose, to spite God. She has stayed at St. Saviour's not so much from love of the others as from contrition, in penance for her own blighted survival. Domine Jesu Christe, Filii Dei vivi, libera me ab omnibus iniquitatibus meis. For the first time in years, they say the Mass in forbidden Latin, and they put on each morning the old habits of their insolvent order, the long black gowns, the sheer white lawn wimples that swathe their wrinkled throats and make them young again, the flowing black veils falling to their waists in back, the short modern dresses and unwimpled veils imposed upon them like masquerade costumes by their enlightened superiors. They burn, and in their old habits, secretly hoarded for their burials, Dorcas and Justitia have come home at last, their native language sweet upon their tongues. Ite missa est, alleluia, says Justitia. Deo gratias, replies Dorcas, alleluia, alleluia. When they have finished, they wash and polish the chalice, shoo the orange tomcat away from the altar rail, and take inventory. Whatever's become of all our lovely candles, wonders Dorcas, sorting through the supply cupboard. The ones in here were melted in the fire, of course, but I brought a new box down from the storage room upstairs just last week. There are at least 24 of the big white altar candles left in here, and look, only 4 left. Mice, rasps Justitia in her cigarette voice. She has seen Lena on her nightly wanderings, seen the candles and the wine. How can she grudge them if the burnt God on his crucifix does not need to? Besides, she has recognized Lena and knows who she is in the great world, who her tall, secret husband is, with his absent eyes and cautious walk. He moves like a man in a war zone, walking over mines. He and Lena are actors, and actors need light and the warmth of wine. They disguise their names, calling themselves Mr. and Mrs. Cornelius, but disguise, too, is an actor's privilege, with which Justitia does not interfere. God, after all, traveled incognito now and then himself. Just mice, she reassures Dorcas. Mice will eat anything that doesn't eat them first. And I suppose mice carry away wine by the bottles, do they? Huffs Dorcas. There were 4 bottles in here, now there's only 2. Justitia shrugs, chases an invading black squirrel with her ironwood walking stick. Winos, then. There is a park below the plunge of the bluffs, and bums sleep there, watching the boats on the lake, warming themselves at small fires. Winos will drink anything that doesn't drink them first. The idea! Those people have no business in here. Dorcas makes the sign of the cross upon the altar, then upon her forehead, her lips, her breast, where the priest's forgotten pectoral cross dangles against her reborn habit. There are limits, you know. You don't say. Justitia sniffs, smiles at their usurped priesthood, at the hole in the chapel wall where the off-limits sun pours in. People who live in glass booby hatches, you silly old twit, she growls, had damn well better not throw stones. And laying about her sharply, with the walking stick to vanquish cats and squirrels and the terrors of her newfound freedom, she stomps her way upstairs. It is Justitia who sees everything that happens that morning. The old house, which is St. Saviour's, is built like a castle, with stone turrets off the wings on either side, Toronto throbbing at its back, the high Scarborough bluffs its defenses, the lake its private moat. The bluffs are a pale sandy grey, at their top a mere 13,000 years old, twice as old as Abraham at least. At their base they enter the memory of God, who according to informed sources laid their foundations nearly 90,000 years ago. A month ago, sumac and red creeper spilled down their faces like cascades of blood, but now they are bare. The bluffs wait like the prow of a ship at anchor, as though they might any moment set sail across the wide blue-grey water. St. Saviour's their wheelhouse, and Justitia, chain-smoking players unfiltered in her office high in the eastern turret, their captain, keeper of charts and logs. The little room, which is her office, has windows on two sides, and from where she sits, her feet in scuffed men's jogging shoes propped on her dented green metal desk, just as you can see the park below the bluffs to the south, and to the east the sharp curving slope of Brimley Road as it dives down through wooded ravines to meet the lake. It is early, and it is not Sunday, and only a few souls are in the park. A little boy running out to the neck that juts into the lake and back again, trailing a blue and orange Japanese kite that will not fly. A tall man in a torn jacket, his blue jeans tucked into run-over cowboy boots, who crouches over a tiny illegal fire to warm his hands. A squarish old man in a worn blue mackintosh, playing a flute to an audience of geese and gulls. A woman alone, her shoulders hunched inside a thin jacket, her body bent against the wind from the lake as she stands at the farthest tip of the land, staring into the blank brightness of the inland sea. And the old Chinese called father. He stands on the spill of rocks that banks the still-water pool where the fish hide, casting his bamboo pole in an arc so perfect that the whitefish and the black bass and the muskie, seeing its shadow overhead, flex and shimmer and dart away, not noticing that there is neither hook nor line on father's pole. Sister Dorcas, too, is in the park, her habit hitched up around her waist to keep it from the frosty grass. She circles and fidgets like a nervous starling, darting and pecking among the clumps of fragrant white pine and the tamaracks, shaggy and red-brown in their autumn dress. Dorcas bends, feeling with her fingers in the grass, and Justitia, watching from above, has a coughing fit and lights another cigarette. "What's the fool doing?" she mutters, "digging fish worms for him?" But in spite of herself, Justitia smiles. She closes her eyes, listening to the music from downstairs where Simon, the man with no fingers, is playing the piano. The notes are smeared by these blunt paws. The melody a message in ink that has run in the rain and must be deciphered. There is a peculiar beauty in their imperfect music, reformed and completed by the listening mind. "My sweetheart's the man in the moon," hums Justitia. "I'm going to marry him soon." It is this song that accompanies her memory of what happens next. In the years that remain before she dies of lung cancer, she will play the scene over and over like looped film against the mind's screen. Below the turret, on the east side of St. Saviour's facing Brimley Road, there is a parking lot. Lena's husband parks his car there, a small brown sedan with dented doors and paint peeling off the hatch of the boot. At 10:35 that Thursday morning, the 9th day of November, Justitia opens her eyes from smoke and music to see Anthony Devlin walking toward the small brown Chevy in the lot. As always, his steps are cautious, as though he is afraid that somewhere between the door of the house and the door of the car, the ground will open and swallow him and the woman he is carrying. Lena is dressed in the blue calico wrapper, and she is neither asleep nor unconscious. Her arms hang like a halter around her husband's neck, her small hands locked tight behind his head. He reaches the car, opens the door with one hand, and uses the other to pry apart her hands, so tightly are they clasped. Gently, as if she were bleeding or somehow broken, he puts her into the car and closes the door, then goes round and folds his own long legs in behind the steering wheel. Mr. Cornelius, indeed. Justitia has read every play of Shakespeare a dozen times and knows the characters by heart. Anthony Devlin was a famous Hamlet once and owned the stage. Now he is Cornelius, the king's silent ambassador. In all that waterfall of poetry, Cornelius stands mute and personless, watching from the edge of the stage. He is a name without a nature, tongueless as a muffled bell. The engine coughs, growls, catches. Justitia watches it back and circle, heading for the drive. A month ago, seeing this, she would have been obliged to sound alarms, alert guards, drag the woman back inside, institute proceedings and restraining orders against the man. But she is no centurion now. She has cleansed herself of brute authority. Let them go, she thinks. Poor things, let 'em all go free. The little car pulls warily out of the parking lot onto Brimley Road, turns up the steep incline, headed for Kingston Road in the city. The old nun sighs, lights another, players. Overhead, a flight of wild geese passes, their restless cries inaudible except to memory. Late for the time of year, thinks the old woman. They should have been gone long ago. Like me. She closes her eyes, traveling south. When she opens them again, she blinks and stares and shades them to be certain of the sight. Devlin's small brown car makes a U-turn at the farthest visible curve of Brimley Road. It skids crazily, tipping for a second onto two wheels, rocking, righting itself, veering against the curbing, and finally hurtling downward, straight down the sharp drop toward the lake. From where Justitia stands watching, its downward plunge is soundless. She does not hear the roar of the strained engine or the squeal of tires. Silently, with no more visible effort than a bird's flight, the car swerves, spins like a leaf in the wind, then dives lightly, silently, purposefully, off the sheer edge of the road. For an instant it hovers there, all motion arrested, and the old nun in her tower believes she can see, though the distance and her cataracts make it impossible, the faces of Anthony Devlin and Clea Warren before the last downward leap into a copse of maples and sentinel spruce in the ravine. Justitia sees nothing more, only the fist of fire that pounds upward through the trees as the car explodes. Except in her mind's eye, she does not see the dead face of Anthony Devlin, his cheek cut open to the bone by the windshield glass, his pale eyes fronting the fire, the gold circle of his earring glinting red against the flames. She does not hear the voice of Clea Warren, thrown clear of the car and lying in a nest of dead leaves, her soft child's hair tangled with creeper and ground ivy, screaming with rage at the death of her mad self, her hiding place. What Justitia hears are the spectral cries of a flock of wild geese bound southward, and the smashed notes of an out-of-tune piano played against despair. Then behind a dark cloud, where no one is allowed, I'll make love to the man in the moon. I wanted to read it to you partly because I just simply wanted the experience of reading it to an audience to see how you responded to it. And it is something a bit different. The book is a change from my others, which have been in first person. This one is third person. It's not within the mind of Winston Sherman. It jumps in and out of all kinds of minds, but I have sort of cheated that on my last several books because I have been kind of popping in and out of Winston's point of view and then just sort of blaming everything on him later. But we decided that, in sort of conference with my editor and my agent, that it was time to make this move. And we hope that at some point this will convince reviewers that we are kind of oozing our way out of category and into mainstream fiction. I wanted to write about someone who has to cope with not only the challenges of seeing death happen to people, but also the challenge of his own aging and his own approaching end, and of seeing the people that he loves grow old and change. I also wanted someone who would have to deal with the changes in the world that have happened. And he doesn't deal with them particularly happily. He is very frustrated with computers. Anything electronic drives him crazy. He has seen an entire new pecking order develop at the college where he once was a valued teacher, and his methods of teaching, his interests in subject matter are now marginal. Shakespeare is a marginal part of the curriculum in the school where he works. And every year he gets a retirement gift from the faculty and staff, and every year he shoves it in the attic and pretends it doesn't exist and goes on blackmailing, cajoling, and coaxing his way into another year of work, because work is what means most to him. And part of his work gradually becomes the solving of crimes, but it's not a case of someone just fiddling around trying to relieve his boredom by solving a crime. I think Winston has never treated death and pain as anything but real. Well, Winston's birthplace is Iowa. So, yes, yes, definitely he's a Midwesterner. He's basically a Midwestern human being. He lacks pretensions. He has no sense of the kind of class distinction that comes so easily in the East Coast and is so difficult for Easterners to shake. And when he encounters the woman that he's lived with without marrying for 40 years or so, and her father, who is a theater critic for the New York Times and a very aristocratic, or at least pretentious kind of person. Most aristocrats aren't pretentious, but anyway, he is. So he feels like an outsider. He begins in their world as an outsider. And I think probably that's because I felt that way going back east from here to work in the theater. I think that perhaps being a Midwesterner, I don't have the kind of protective shell that a lot of people that I know who were born back east have. As a writer, I can come to my characters. Well, it's sort of like, you approach them naked instead of wearing clothes, or it's and in many ways that's been painful in terms of dealing with the kind of hierarchies of publishing and all of that. And you have to learn to at least pretend you have a shell in order to deal with people who expect one from you, and sort of stick the knife in as though there were one there. But I do think that has given me a certain advantage as a writer, because I don't have to cut through all that garbage. I have an openness maybe that to experience and to people that it's not quite so easy to maintain on the subways of New York City. It's not as dangerous here to look people in the eye and see what's there. So maybe that's given me some help, and maybe that's why I stay. I've been asked to say what it is that I would want to give to the world in general by means of what I write. I think that can probably best be answered if I paraphrase a writer that I have always admired very much, and whom I saw once briefly in New York when I was doing a production at a theater where he had worked. His name is Tennessee Williams. And he once wrote a line about people who live in separate rooms and can communicate only by knocking on the walls to convince one another that they are still there. What I want to do is give a voice to those hands on the walls. you.